All right, welcome to Nested Loops. We're going to do we're doing "Badass Making Users Awesome" by Kathy Sierra, and the next section is "Science of Badass" by Brett. And I'll turn it over to him once I figure out what my
Okay,
cursor is. Hold
this
on.
chapter is building skills, the section of Science of Badass. You guys can all hear me well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so you can't have expertise without expert skills, and one of our key roles is helping users move each skill from can't do to can do. But there's two different levels of can do. There's conscious effort, which is not reliable, and mastered, which is reliable and automatic. So we want everyone to get over to the mastered as much as we can. And the question is stated, is this the best way to have progression for expertise? Do we want to move some stuff from can't to can do with effort, and then start to move some more of that over to mastered, and then eventually be out of can't do stuff, even be out of can do with effort and have everything over to mastered? And the answer is no, this is actually not a good progression. There's three problems or reasons. Experts often or sometimes can move directly from A to C and hop the can do with effort. True experts never truly have an empty A board. They're forever adding new skills or refinement of existing skills. And it's common that experts move skills from B to C, of course, but it's also common to move skills backwards from C to B. And the question is why? Why would we ever want to unmaster ourselves with stuff? And there was a really good example in the book about the ski instructor. And I agree with this fully. I think about this all the time in life. But basically, this ski instructor determined that one way to break some of his students out of intermediate blues to mastered was to actually unlearn and relearn one of the skills that they already had as mastered. Basically, it comes down to you hit a point where you've solidified all your skills a certain way, so you just keep learning them the same way, but you may not necessarily be learning them the best way. And how this goes in line with how if you alter or improve any aspect of your life, you may have unexpected improvements in other places of your life or your work or whatever you're working on. So it's interesting because I really thought this was a great point. But basically, this ski instructor determined that changing one previously automated skill could break these people out of intermediate blues, and that was like the most powerful way of that he could do that. And related to that, use it to lose it is a myth. Using it is not even enough. If you don't use the skill for a while, of course, it becomes rusty. But what about skills you use every day? Many professionals, for example, reach a level of expertise and think, I can finally quit practicing and now just use my hard-earned skills. But if we don't consciously practice these skills that we've already, quote, mastered, they can slowly deteriorate. I'm just going to go back if I can. I don't even know how. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions on?
This sort of is. I think this is related to something that's close to my heart. I think a lot of people, they go through the motions for some stuff, and they're happy with what that brings them. It's like if you've ever helped someone with the computer and they have like in their mind like this little steps of step one, step two, step three. They don't really know what those steps are, but they know, oh well, when I need to do this in Microsoft Word, I do ABC, and that's fine, 96% of the time. And the one time they need something different, they don't understand because they didn't understand what the steps were, but they just kind of did them by rote. They're like lost.
Right.
And I think it's like this sort of, I think this is talking about sort of like this relatively shallow level of understanding where it's good enough to work, but you don't really know how it works. I see this a lot in programming. I see a lot of people when they debug, they do what I call shotgun. They just throw random things until things work because that used to work for them. It's like when you really understand some things, you do things differently. So I sort of see this as intermediate. I guess an intermediate level of some skill is, I mean, you're okay, you're not that good, and it's part of the reason you're not that good is because you don't really understand it, but it works good enough for you. So this whole, you're using it, like I do it every day. Like this guy might use Microsoft Word the way his little crib notes say every day. So it's not like he doesn't use it, but he doesn't really understand. It's not really a deep level understanding.
I like that example of Microsoft Word because what if Microsoft Word updates Word? It's like you don't necessarily understand the underlying concepts or features. You're just kind of like clicking that blue button, then you're clicking another button. You don't really even know what you're doing. So if they upgrade Microsoft Word, you're not able to like retreat back and that makes sense.
Because you don't really understand, but you know the steps well enough that it generally works. I see a lot of people code that way, where they go, I watch people debug and I go in my head, I go, oh my God, they have no idea what's going on because they're just doing random things. But you get people who've coded that way their entire life, so it can work.
I wanted to go back to this just to look at it.
Yeah, it really is like an external thing sometimes. Like, it's not about you. Like, if you go from C to B, like we work in tech, there's always new programming languages coming out. There's always new like software, things like that. So, you can think you master something, but then Microsoft Word, they upgrade something, and then now you're like back to B. So, and I feel like in tech, you really can't be complacent.
Right. That's true. Definitely true. And yeah, experts never have an empty A board. I think that, yep. It's easy to get stuck in a rut and not add more things to your A board, I feel like. Okay. Any more questions or comments? I'll move on. Okay, so how do experts build expertise? Because we see that moving from A to B and then B to C doesn't necessarily work. And so just reiterating the previous slide, experts never stop adding new skills. Experts build skills both consciously and unconsciously, and experts refine existing skills. We could probably talk about the difference between consciously and unconsciously. Anyone have any comments about the consciously versus unconsciously? There's kind of some more examples about it later on, but
yeah, I mean, I think related to the previous page, we were talking about using is not enough. I think the kind of person that makes an expert, when you say consciously, you literally go back and you go, hey, I'm really not as good at this thing as I am. A lot of this goes to, you don't know what you don't know, but the better you get, the more you know what you don't know, if that makes any sense. And so then, as I know that I don't know stuff, I go back and I revisit something, right? And so I think a certain type of person is not happy, or over time they realize, I could be better at X, Y, Z. I'm going to go back and revisit it. And I think very few people do that in general across almost any discipline, where it's only those guys that are really, lack of a better word, obsessed. They go, no, I gotta make this better, what am I,
right.
What's wrong with my game, and you could apply this to almost anything that's a complicated skill. For example, I've been looking at, I came across this new method of how to visualize scales, and the guy simplified the method down to this sequence, and I go, oh, this is really good. And I look back and I go, I'm not that good at this, so I should go back and do this. And yet I can do it okay. And again, to people with lesser experience, they figure I'm probably pretty good at it. Like, oh, I'm not that good at this. I'm going to go back and do this. And part of, I think, besides that critical eye, is the willingness to go back to the drawing board. This seems to hit a lot of people. No, I'm already good at X, Y, Z. I can't possibly start over, refine, or whatever.
Cool. Yeah. So, we all know unconsciously building skills. I mean, that's just working. But the next section goes into more of the conscious part. So there's two key things that experts do different. One of them is they practice better. And this example, I practiced piano forever. It didn't make me amazing. It really can't be just that they practice more. Experts generally, it's not that they're practicing harder, they're not practicing longer, they're practicing better. And how do we define better practice? In the book, we basically talk about deliberate practice, the majority of the chapter. So how do you practice better? Deliberate practice. And deliberate practice does not mean practice deliberately. Deliberate practice fixes the single biggest problem most people have when they try building expertise. The single biggest problem for most people is that they have too many things on the B board, which is you can do it, but only with effort. And we wrongly try to learn and practice too many things simultaneously instead of nailing one thing at a time. We want this, a good balance, fewer skills in the B board, and we do not want this, which is often what happens. Okay, I guess we could define deliberate practice more, but I'll move on and say deliberate practice helps prevent pileup of mediocre skills. This pileup doesn't just slow progress, it can kill it, or worse. Practice activities that are not deliberate practice can be riskier than just not practicing at all. The main reason for that is practice makes permanent. Most practice doesn't guarantee better performance. Most practice locks in whatever's practice. The more time we spend practicing mediocre, the better we get at being mediocre. I don't know if anyone wants to I don't know if I skipped over it. It's just not clear to me, like a clear sentence that defines deliberate practice. But I guess I see deliberate practice as trying really hard.
I think, I don't know, this is my interpretation. She's basically saying choose a focus. Like, don't just meander around and like dipping your toes into this topic and that topic. You should like dive into one thing.
Yeah, trying really hard wasn't the right definition. But so okay, I kind of think about this in terms of like tools that I use with work. I often find that I just sit there and the way that I search files for text on the Mac or in Linux is this command line program called grep, and I'll just use grep left and right, and then every once in a while someone will introduce to me some new program or new ability to do something. It really just changes the way that I look at everything. For example, I grep logs a lot, just straight text logs, and Don introduced Graylog to me, and it's like I probably would have sat there grepping for 4 hours on certain things that I can find in Graylog immediately, but versus me trying to look for a new logging solution, install a new logging solution, test one, see if it's better, I would just sit there and grep. I'm actually I'm big at just doing what works, but this book is basically saying that's bad, and I agree with that. But often, if I'm presented with a situation where I can do it the way I know it, even though I know that there's probably a better way of doing it, even if it's going to take me an hour, I just do it the way I know it. So it's a really interesting point. Does anyone have any thoughts or examples of that where they do that in their lives?
I mean, I think I want to say there's a certain inertia with what you're doing. So for you to change that inertia, it has to be worth your time, you know? And for each one, you'll judge, well, how much time I'm going to spend? Well, I can spend all this time. It also depends on how good you are at some things.
Right.
For example, when we're talking grep, you can use grep to do before and afters. So like when we talk in the log, you can set up grep and say, show me 2 lines before and 3 lines after. Like there's really a huge amount of things, and there's other greps, egrep, fgrep. There are various greps. So you could be super, super powerful with that.
That's true.
And then you can look at gray log, and it may or may not fit, or you can't do what you want to do. Like, okay, I can do 80% of what I want with my advanced grep stuff. Or I can spend a half hour learning how to do something slightly better in gray log. And it depends. Right. Well, if I got a half hour, maybe I'll do that. But if my boss needs his report in 3 minutes, I'm not doing that.
Right. Vim is a good example for me. I have programmed, I don't use Vim on a daily basis, but there was a point where I used Vim for 2 years on a daily basis for everything I coded. And I really don't know that much about Vim. I know insert, I know replace, I know how to select a line. I'm not good at buffers. I know string replace, and that's about it. I probably know about 1% of what Vim does, if that. And I've been able to do it with a full-time job and for years. But I see no reason to learn more. But the second that I learn a new feature, I realized that I could have saved a lot of time. So it is a tricky balance with inertia.
Yeah, so you pick and choose what you want to work on, and I think some people don't even pick and choose. So there's a certain amount of things where, like I used to learn a lot more than I currently do, and in part because I just love that nerd stuff. And I have a bit of burnout, which has to do less with not loving nerd stuff, but more community things that kind of aggravate me.
Right.
But you have to, sometimes you're just motivated. Sometimes you go, I'm just going to learn all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it depends on what it is. You go, I'm going to try this, and it was really painful, and you stop. And you try this other thing, it's really cool, and you keep going. So there's a variability, but there's a certain sort of person, I think, that goes and learns and can overcome that inertia more easily than others.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're right, the obsessive part is true, because I feel like the times where I've learned the most is when I was really frustrated with why something wasn't working how I expected. So you have to go in, like with code, for an example, go in and look at how the library works, and then maybe even find out that the library has a bug. But like if you're looking at docs, and the docs tell you that, method XYZ is going to print hello and it doesn't print hello, a certain like level of obsessiveness takes over, because you're like, I just don't understand this. And I'm sure a lot of people at that point just give up.
Yeah.
All right, I'll use a different tool. So yeah, I've learned the most when I'm truly trying to understand stuff. This is probably my most favorite slide or idea, because I fully agree with this. Half a skill beats half-ass skills. And mastering one tiny, useless on its own sub-skill at a time is nearly always a more effective, efficient way to move explicitly practice skills from A all the way to C. And in this picture just proves it. It's like if you could have one mastered skill versus a skill that you may or may not necessarily be able to use. Well, when you need that mastered skill, you're going to have it. It's almost like having something in B. It's almost as though you don't have it. So it has no value. I thought that was awesome. And I wish I could think of examples, but as an engineer, I speak in terms of engineering. Like the engineer that just kind of keeps their head down and tries to figure out the small stuff.
It could be like like a refactoring, right? You have all the refactoring tools in B, or you have 2 or 3 refactoring tool in C. You're very familiar and you use them a lot. And then I think this is kind of stuff like if you have all the refactoring in B, chances are that you don't get to use them, right?
Right.
Like you don't, it does not come natural to use them. But let's say you have like a 2 or 3 refactoring skills in C. Whenever the opportunity happens, you do use them. Same thing like with design patterns, right? You're very familiar with like those 3, and maybe you're gonna have the problem of trying to see make them fit when they don't, but when they do fit, you use them.
Right.
Well, then when they're all in B, chances are don't use any of them.
Yeah. That's not too bad.
Yeah. Wish I had some better examples of this. I guess if you're working on a team, if you have 10 people that have mastered skills, you can also kind of use everyone to what their power is. So yeah, I have like thoughts about how not programming okay. There are exceptions to this half a skill beats half-ass skills though. Basically has to do with there's a minimally viable skill threshold, which is definitely true. Definitely, yeah. I think Forrest, you might have been kind of commenting on this earlier. There's programmers that they get to the point where they're starting to edit files and stuff like that, but then they don't necessarily learn any more than that. But until I don't know how to put it into words, but basically, until you have a couple aha moments, you don't really feel like you know how to program. Once you have those aha moments, a lot of people just stop. They just continue from there. They end up programming in PHP, WordPress for the rest of their lives. No, I'm only joking. Sorry if anyone programs WordPress. Okay. So
I think the difference between you and me and Diego is you apologize and we don't.
He had an example. I was trying not to pull too much directly from the book, but basically, you may not want to be on the bunny slope all the time. So, you learn enough to get onto a blue square or whatever when you're skiing. And then once you're past that minimally initial threshold, then switch to fine grain sub skills. I thought that was a really cool idea. Out of all the chapters, I like this one a lot. Okay, simplified rules for deliberate practice. Design practice exercises that will take a fine-grained task from unreliable to 95% reliable within 1 to 3 45 to 90-minute sessions. I guess it's probably in the references, and they probably talk about what was this the author like. What's their history? Are they a PhD in something or?
So Kathy Sierra, she was like what did she work for? She did a lot of Java evangelizing. That was her original tech position, and then she became famous for this blog. What was it called? It's very similar to the title, but the whole thing, creating passionate users. So then she ended up becoming the person that invented Head First series with O'Reilly books, which was the thing that we're seeing here, this multi-sensory approach, visuals, pictures, exercises.
Right.
And so between those two, she's always been this evangelist for making your users passionate, of which, that you can see how that feeds into badass users.
I know at one point during this chapter, she referenced some like Cambridge study or something like that. And I just thought it's funny because it's like, I'm just curious where she gets these ideas.
Well, she was a coder, but on the other hand, these days, mostly she does like horse training.
Interesting.
She teaches, I don't know how much is teaching the rider versus the horse. But so if you want to talk about some skill that she has, she spent a lot of time, she trains horses or horse riders or something.
But by the way,
something I understand nothing about.
I'm trying to figure out if she came up with this or if she read it somewhere.
I'm sure she studied how to study.
So she has a major in exercise physiology,
Mm.
and she worked in fitness industry.
Got it.
Then she learned how to code, got different jobs. I'm looking at the Wikipedia.
Mm.
Like work on video games, then started working as a trainer, master's trainer, Sun Microsystem, teaching Java, and then she did the N3st.
So, because I'm next couple of things I try to learn, I'm gonna keep this in mind because I'm definitely one of those people that the first way that I learn before I pick up any books or anything is I just sit down in front of like a couple 1-hour videos on YouTube. So I'll just watch like a video on a particular thing from 5 different people, 5 different videos. So I'm gonna see if I could use this kind of concept. Fine-grained task, 45 to 90 minutes. Instead of trying to learn, I don't know, all of authentication, I'll just learn devise authentication in Rails. I don't know. Okay, if you can't get to 95% reliability, stop trying. You need to redesign this sub skill. If the task is too complex, break it into finer grained subtasks. If it's not too complex but just too difficult, make the performance criteria easier.
That sounds like how you're supposed to TDD. Or you don't chew off more than you should be able to handle.
Right.
And you're supposed to be writing tests every few minutes instead of like, because people start and they go, oh, I'm going to write a test, and then it takes them 2 hours to make it pass. Well, that's not how it works.
Right.
It's supposed to take like a minute.
These are great guidelines because yeah.
You know, and so people, and then they give up. Oh, well, I tried GDD. I wrote 2 tests and I spent all day. Well, that's wrong. You got to figure out a way to break it down that you're writing tests every few minutes, making them pass.
Okay, some examples of deliberate practice. These are some of them. Shoot the basketball into the hoop while standing 8 to 12 feet from the hoop at a 45-degree angle. You could do that in 1 to 3 sessions. Create, compile, and run a program without errors that accesses and displays data from this database. Create 4 test blog posts using the starter template with photos inserted at the top and the middle of the post. And analyze the 6 cockpit instruments and determine the plane's attitude within 5 seconds. And the book basically goes on to say it's very clear if you can figure it out or not.
Is that attitude or altitude?
No, that's attitude.
Attitude is the way it's pointing.
Yeah, like
Got it.
left or right. Not left or right, but banking kind of thing. Okay, work on a project. For example, examples that are not deliberate practice. Work on a project, for example, creating a small game in a new programming language. Interesting is that the Rails book that I learned to use Rails had a project the whole way through. I don't know. Work on a step-by-step tutorial. Listen to a lecture or a presentation. That's what I do when I start. And play a complete piece of music at a speed that you already performed reliably. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this?
Wow. On your first bullet, if it was was it the Dave Thomas?
Yeah, I wrote that one.
I mean, that's a big project throughout, but each section's pretty focused.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like I forget what the project is. I'm gonna build this thingy, but chapter 1 is set up Rails, and chapter 2 is generate your first model, and then chapter 3 is set up the controller.
I guess that's true. That's true.
Chapter 4 is like authentication, and then chapter 5 is add the ballot system or whatever. So.
I feel like she says they're not deliberate practice, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Like these may not be the best ways to go about things, but like people learn differently. So if you feel like there's value and you like watching a video for a few minutes, and then maybe someone has some other insight that then you take and go, oh wait, that like applies to me, and like do something with it. I feel like that's valuable too.
And that brings us to our next slide. Practice that is not deliberate practice.
Oh, sorry.
Valuable and necessary. No, that's good. It means that you read the book. No. All right. Playing and performing is not deliberate practice. Step-by-step tutorials are not deliberate practice. Projects are not deliberate practice. But there's still things that we do, and they're still valuable. maybe the order can switch. But yeah, I agree, Alexis. Okay, that 10,000 hours thing, I'm glad they mentioned this. Most people have heard of the whole anyone can get good at anything if they do it for 10,000 hours. If you try to go golfing for 10,000 hours, you'll get good at it. Well, one, it's not a rule, and it's 10,000 deliberate practice hours, not just like I'm going to go hang out and play golf. It does not mean anyone that practices 10,000 hours will be an expert. It does not mean that you can't be an expert with fewer than 10,000. It doesn't mean that you won't make further progress. Some domains may take far fewer hours and some might take more. And some people may be quicker and some others.
I mean, I think that's another thing that's a reverse thing. Like the guys that are the best probably have done 10,000 hours. But it doesn't mean that if you do 10,000, you'll be one of the best.
Right. That's in the book. I didn't put it here, but yep, exactly. It's
right.
like, yep.
It's like if all policemen wear sunglasses, doesn't mean wearing sunglasses makes you a policeman.
Right. Good example. Okay, why? Why is not everyone doing deliberate practice? If every teacher and everyone knows that you're supposed to practice, not practice deliberately, but do deliberate practice, why? Well, the problem is that the wrong ways to practice feel right. Most of us have a ton of experience practicing. Most of us were taught that to practice means doing more of it more often. We're told it's about putting in the time and working hard. And most practice does not focus on building individual skills and sub-skills to 95% reliably within 1 to 3 practice sessions. 2 things that I thought about this is, I guess that's why life is not that easy. And 2, this vividly reminded me of, I think it was 5th grade, maybe it was 7th grade, Spanish 101, and the Spanish teacher sat you down and said, conjugate this verb 600 times. I don't know if it used to be the way that they used to teach languages, but anyone that's done the old school way of learning a foreign language or whatever, it's like conjugate these 5 things 100 times. I don't know if anyone sat through that, but this brought back a burning memory of one of the worst teachers I ever had, specifically. That is like a common way to learn.
That's a toughie. There's a good, I think this is concept, and I forgot the videos that I watched. It was really good. The difference between acquiring a language and learning a language.
Right.
And it kind of really addressed your whole, this is how we teach, but it kind of sucks because that's not how people actually acquire. And people don't get it. And most of us have probably taken that foreign language class in junior high school that we can barely understand this language. But of course, there's 2 or 3 people in your class that became like experts and now live in that country.
Right. Well, the whole thing is, so they mentioned this about how non-deliberate practice is still beneficial. It's like there's a fear of crystallizing bad things. There's a fear at being better at being mediocre. Mm-hmm. But there's also some truth in saying you can like very slowly learn through non-deliberate practice. And with the Spanish example, it's like during that 1 year of Spanish, I know I did not learn much at all, but in later on years with different teachers, I still got a lot of value out of it. I just know that it was like such a slow way of doing it. So it's interesting. If that made any sense right there.
The right focus makes a difference, I think. In the whole acquiring thing, I had to figure out that. I watched it and I thought there was a lot of applications to almost any skill. And looking back, it is deliberate practice. There's certain things you do. Though in the case of language, you have to be not afraid to speak. Like a lot of the acquiring thing is immersion.
Right.
As long as you do 42 minutes of Spanish and then English the rest of your day, it doesn't sink in. It's sort of related to immersion, the things in language immersion. He says, oh, well, you should get, like he says, you should find a person that's a native in the language and get to them regularly and have conversation and force yourself to not use English. And in a lot of ways he models how kids learn whatever language they're raised in, and they don't study and they don't conjugate. Your 2-year-old is not conjugating the verb 26 times.
Right.
And he says, but the 2-year-old is not afraid to go and say things and say it wrong. And eventually he ends up correcting it, partly by observing around him. It's a long story, but anyways, watching this reminds me of that. It's a very interesting approach.
All right. Why the right ways of practice feel wrong? Deliberate practice is always just beyond our current ability and comfort zone. Many of us subconsciously resist what we can't do even during practice. We keep repeating what we can already do, hoping to get incrementally better, or we practice skills way past our current ability. This all resonated with me. It's like the whole learning process. You really have to deal with stubbornness. That's what I'm getting out of this. Is we're all stubborn, and we just continue to do things the way that
per the first one, and to some extent the second one. I don't think a lot of people know that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yep.
Right? Yep. They didn't look, and a lot of times not because they don't want to look, they're just not aware.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if everyone came, hey, did you know you did this? But no, I don't. I didn't know that I did that. Right? And so, and I suspect some people that get to expert quicker are more self-aware in that reaction.
Right.
And some of that might be attitude, like the whole first bullet, we resist what we can't do. The guys that are best are saying, I embrace what I can't do and I'm going to fix it. And so they almost actively look for what they're not good at.
Right. It's almost like part of the value in a teacher-student relationship is that the teacher can point out something that you're not even aware that you're resisting. But yeah, if you don't have the right attitude and the teacher tells you, hey, you're resisting this,
Yeah,
it's like
the opposite is, I know how to do this. I know how to do this.
Yeah. Don't tell me. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you have to say. I know.
All right. And again, practice makes permanent. Okay. Just some points that were added. So generally, some deliberate practice is necessary to build skills. You could have non-deliberate practice. I don't know why the book said some deliberate practice. It didn't say like you need deliberate practice. I guess it's just saying like, hey, we understand that's not fun. We understand that it's not easy. But if you're shooting to do deliberate practice, and 10% of the time, 20% of the time you get out of your comfort zone, you'll benefit. So, yeah. And just to repeat the 2 common attributes among experts, the right type of practice, which is practicing better, deliberate practice, and master performers did something else that didn't feel like practice. And this quote, this almost magical second attribute can produce knowledge and skill in powerful, dramatic ways, and in many cases, better than any amount of direct instruction or practice.
Yeah, your previous slide had a bullet about it's not generally not fun. And one of the guys I trained with, Bert Richardson, I would say his magical point was he would figure out how to do these drills. It's the equivalent of conjugate this verb 1,000 times, but he made it fun. So
right.
you would work on a skill and you'd work it over and over again, but he would frame it into this game that made you like to do it. The problem with conjugate the verb 1,000 times is after 3 you're bored and it's not fun.
Right.
There's a game for like character recognition that kind of looks like Tetris for Chinese. Like it was stroke order. It would drop a character and you were supposed to do the stroke order right. And if you got it right, it would disappear. Right? And that was a way. And then probably none of you know. So Chinese, written Chinese is not only hard because it's a picture, but there's a right way to write it. There's a stroke order. And if you learn the stroke order, your characters will tend to look better by design. But anyways, kids hate this. I had 4 kids, tried to teach them. Not one of them wanted to do this. But by number 4, they had this game where it would come down, and it was a game, and you had to, the incentive in the form was such that no, he's still practicing it, but instead of having this worksheet of 5,000 words, it was this game in real time, and your points went up as you did it faster. It was very Tetris-like, and they would drop from the thing, and if a certain amount, hit the bottom before you got the stroke order wrong, you lost. And but back to that method for stroke order and Bert's general way of figuring out how to design exercises in a way that they're fun goes a long way to helping you do deliberate practice.
Yeah.
I think there's something about, right, I'm going to say 2 different things that are connected. One is like deliberate practice. In a different book that I read, they talk about a lot about practicing at the edge of your ability or performing, whether it is at the edge of your abilities. So there are generally 3 things, like, the things that don't feel like practice, like what do we call it over here? Like the wrong way to practice feels right. And because especially you're doing or you're practicing stuff that you already know how to do, right? And if you are to compare it to something that is like physical, it becomes very obvious. Meaning stretching. When you stretch, if you don't feel any stretch, right, you're not really stretching.
Right.
Like you're not improving your stretch. The way you're improving your flexibility is by stretching to the edge of your abilities, meaning, you feel the stretch, but also not hurting. And you stretch a little bit more, and then you release a little bit. So you go at the edge of the abilities, and then you step back. And like it was before felt like a stretch, now it doesn't feel like a stretch. And it's not like trying to do something you cannot do, like a side split, because you're gonna rip your groin and muscle and everything, right?
Right.
So when we deal with stuff like that, like yoga, martial art, and all other bunch of stuff, it's very obvious. I feel like stuff that it's physical like that.
Okay.
But when stuff is more abstract, and in some cases, like even music, there's portion of it that are abstract. It's not as obvious, right? What is a stretch of your abilities of your mind, and what is the common stuff that you already know how to do? Because I actually use it like this kind of like stuff. I used it in the past, like when I learning guitar and learning like jazz and stuff like that. Deliberate practice or practicing at the edge of your abilities, it's very tiring.
Right.
It's really exhausting. It's mentally exhausting, not just physically. But like afterward, like you're shot. Like it's very hard to do more than 1 hour at a time.
Right.
And so like the right way feels wrong because it's super tiring. Like I had a conversation with my girlfriend about memorizing stuff, and a way of studying, like for tests and stuff like that. And I was talking about Otis method, like memorization,
Story.
like Palace. What?
You need a story.
Yeah, you need a story. You come up with what's it called? A memory palace. There's like a way to help her with numbers. And she thought, yeah, that's a lot of work, right? And the thing that my point was, yeah, and because it's a lot of work, you're gonna remember it more. But also, it's a framework that you set it up once, and it's reusable for all other bunch of stuff. but it does require extra work every time you try to memorize something. The thing is, you'll memorize it way faster than just by normal ways.
Now, the physical thing, I mean, it could just be that those examples are simple, like stretching it's simple, but I'm sure that there's like more advanced physical
Yeah.
examples which should be just as bad. So
I mean, like playing guitar, it has a mix of physical and theoretical, right? So you cannot play, let's say, triplets at 200 beats per minute as a beginner. It's impossible, and it takes a long time to get there, right? And there's just a little bit of abstraction that makes it hard to understand how to get there. And the only way to get there is by practicing at the edge of your abilities. You're doing this like stretch and feeling. It's not like it's like why can't you do like move your finger faster of the coordination,
right.
Or but like yeah, some stuff is like very simple. Like I cannot go and do it like a 500-pound deadlift.
Right.
And it'd be silly to think about it, but like a lot of people think about in the same terms when they think about drawing or computer programming and that kind of stuff. They want to, they started computer programming. I want to write a game. It's extremely complicated, right? And like in drawing, what is drawing at the edge of your abilities? Like some of this stuff is because it's abstract. It's hard to even
come up with a framework.
Yeah, come up with a framework in order to do that. Like how do you become a better computer programmer? Like what is programming at the edge of the ability? Show me a book that explains it. Like it's like this is the path. It doesn't exist because it is super abstract. So you kind of have to come up with your own way to do it. There's, I think it was Deep Work or something like that, or I'll look it up. There was a book that was talking about, because you guys also mentioned like somebody teaching, that there's people that have done the same kind of work, but as teachers. So they are like expert and masters at teaching. And there was in one of them, even those like anecdotal a little bit of these stories. There's this one summer school, pretty much, where classical musicians go, and all the big classical musicians from Yo-Yo Ma to whoever you name it, they come out of these workshops, and this one teacher. And the guy that was writing the book observed the teacher, and in practice said that he teaches every single, like it is a different persona, assume a different persona with every single student, because his idea is very zen. It's kind of like, well, every person is different. They need a different coach. And the thing about him that after like a 20, 30 years of teaching that he learned is like he kind of is able to sense from the like first few notes of a musician playing what kind of coach, what kind of teacher that person needs.
Yeah.
If the person is shy, it'll need like a more loving hand. If the person is a different thing, maybe need somebody more energetic, more critical. And then he also has like a different technique to teach music and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like it goes in very different ways. And
you need to know both the way that the person is going to learn. Also, you need to be so skilled and such a master that you're able to see the level that they're on. 'Cause
Right.
Too low, you can't teach them too high. But if if your quote level is not high enough, then you can't see above you, kind of thing.
Right. So apparently, that's why everybody like seeks this one guy, right? Because he in a second he can say, okay, this person is at this level and needs to learn this thing to make it to the next step. It gives them like it kind of like it does like this whole diagnostic like incredibly fast, and then assumes the persona of the person that they need.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's all it does, right? So.
Very cool. Very cool.
It is cool. Yeah. I think that's my last slide. So yeah, that's why. Anyone else has
well, we
anything?
did good on this one. I thought we had a lot of discussion. All right.
Hold on.
Any else? Whatever. Any other comments? Words? Rob?
That's a lot of hablar.
I'm looking. I'm gonna go pull up the book and see how big the next chapter is. Do I even have it ready? Where's my preview? Science of bad. Alright, so next one is building skills. No, we kind of covered. Didn't we hit that one?
No, the next one is perceptual exposure.
A lot more than I thought we would. I should move the page down. 10 down. Okay.
Yeah, that's a media one.
All right. Who wants to do that? Who hasn't gone yet? I think that's Dom. Is that true?
Done. Are you ready for it?
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Don will do perceptual exposure. Doesn't look so long. Hope that'll work out good. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And have a good day.
Thanks, bye.